Hey guys, tonight we're not here to rush or race. We're here to drift, gently and calmly, into the past. To a world where time moved slowly. Hearth fires flickered softly, and survival on cold nights wasn't just a challenge, it was a way of life. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim your lights, settle under your blanket. Let the weight of your day melt into the mattress beneath you. There's no need to do anything right now. Just breathe in and out. Slowly. You're in good company. You're safe here. And if this calm journey helps you unwind, maybe tap like or subscribe. But only if it feels right. Let's keep this gentle. Tonight we begin with the lives of medieval peasants. Humble folk who, through frost and famine, laughter and lard, found ways to make it through even the bitterest of winters. You'll hear tales of porridge so thick it could stand up a spoon, cloaks lined with sheep's wool, and the occasional bug, and why dried peas were sometimes the toast of the village. Now, let your mind slow, like the last glowing embers in a fire, and drift with me. Let me tell you about a night, a long, long time ago, in a crooked little timber-framed cottage tucked into the English countryside. The thatched roof was heavy with snow, sagging gently under its weight like a woolcap stretched a size too far. Inside, everything smelled faintly of wood smoke, boiled cabbage, and something mildly questionable. Maybe old cheese or a forgotten root vegetable. This was the home of a family of peasants, simple folk but clever in the ways that mattered. It was late January, maybe 1322 or so, and the air outside was so cold it felt like it could bite your nose right off if you dared to poke it outside too long. Inside, though, the fire sputtered in the stone hearth, casting warm amber shadows across the wooden walls. The fire was never just for show, of course. It was the heart of the home. The fireplace cooked their food, heated their stones, dried their socks, and offered a modest form of medieval ASMR. The hiss of sap in the logs, the soft puffing of smoke escaping up the crooked chimney. If you listen closely, you might even hear the occasional pop, like nature's own sleepy lullaby. Blankets were scarce, but what they lacked in cozy throws they made up for with layers upon layers of homespun linen, scratchy wool, and sometimes even straw sewn into sacks for a bit of added insulation. Not comfortable by our standards, perhaps, but effective. It was the medieval version of a weighted blanket, if you don't mind a few bugs joining you underneath. And here's the thing. People didn't sleep all the way through the night. They practiced what's now called segmented sleep. There was first sleep and second sleep, with a little period in between where folks might whisper, pray, toss another log on the fire, or even sneak out to check on the livestock. I like to imagine them stirring quietly in the candlelight, not rushing to do anything, just being. Isn't that a comforting thought? Now, when the night grew colder, and it often did, they'd heat stones in the fire, then wrap them in cloth and slip them under the bedding. Medieval hot water bottles, really. The kind of thing that might seem quaint today, but back then it meant the difference between frostbite and toasty toes. Their beds, oh, they were stuffed with straw, and not the golden, picturesque kind you see in storybooks. More like slightly musty field leftovers with the occasional insect stowaway. But still, it was something to curl into, nestled under threadbare coverlets, and the weight of long woolen shifts worn straight to bed, sometimes without even changing clothes. Because why bother really, when you're already wrapped in tomorrow's outfit? The children, small sleepy-eyed bundles of mischief, slept close to the hearth on mats or tucked beside their parents on the straw mattress. Occasionally a goat or two might wander in if the cold became unbearable in the shed, and no one blinked. That's just how things were. Everyone huddled close. Humans, animals, warmth shared like a secret past in the dark. And the food? The food was simple but hearty. Picture a bubbling cauldron of pottage, an eternal stew, always changing depending on what was thrown in. One night it might be turnips, oats and leeks. Another, maybe some salted pork if they were lucky. A bit like a never-ending soup subscription. If that subscription also tasted like cabbage half the time. They ate slowly, spoons carved from wood, dipping into bowls passed from hand to hand. There was no rush, nothing to watch, no texts to reply to, just the flicker of firelight, the slow hum of the wind outside, and the occasional gurgle from someone's belly. And when the night grew quiet, really quiet, like the world had taken a deep breath, they would drift off, not to silence, but to the low symphony of their world, the steady breathing of family, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of mice in the corners. They were almost like unofficial roommates, and the low howl of wind through the wooden slats. Imagine it now, the way the air would nip at your nose even indoors, the way your fingers would creep out from under the covers and immediately regret it, the way warmth was a currency and family a blanket of its own. It might not have been luxurious, but it was honest, and in that honesty there's something profoundly soothing. And as we leave that warm tavern of thought, let your mind wander to, let's slip now into another evening, one a little further north, where the air tastes like snow and pine, and the stars hang so low they almost press against the rooftops. The year is somewhere in the late 1200s, though no one is counting too carefully, because calendars were more of a luxury than a necessity for most folk. And here, in a frost-kissed village just outside what is now northern France, a humble family prepares for the long night ahead. Their cottage leans ever so slightly to the left, like it's listening in on the wind. Smoke curls from the crooked chimney, the scent of burning alderwood mingling with the warm, earthy perfume of baked barley bread cooling near the fire. The fire itself is small, wood is precious, but it's kept alive with care, coddled like a sleeping child. I want you to imagine the feeling of ducking through the low door of that home, the way the warmth would hit your face all at once, like stepping into a memory. You'd blink as your eyes adjusted, then smile at the sight of candlelight playing shadows on the wall and a pot gently rocking over the coals. Tonight's supper is gruel, which may not sound glamorous, and that's fair because it isn't, but it's thick, filling and warm. Made with ground rye, a few scraps of dried onion, and a pinch of something greenish from the herb bundle hung by the door. They didn't call it cuisine, but after a day spent labouring in frozen fields, it probably tasted like comfort itself. There's a boy here, maybe 8 or 9, curled near the hearth, trying to roast a crust of bread on a stick. His cheeks are flushed, his hair a tangle of hay-coloured curls, and his tunic slightly too short. He hums a tuneless song to himself as he watches the bread darken, not noticing the blackened edge creeping in. His sister, older and more serious, scolds him with a whisper, and he shrugs, biting into the crisped end like it's a medieval Pop-Tart. Their mother moves slowly, tucking herbs into little cloth bundles and hanging them near the fire to dry. Everything here has a purpose. Even the string that dangles from the rafters is holding something. A twist of garlic, a bunch of dried nettles, or perhaps a little smoked fish. Nothing goes to waste. The concept of leftovers didn't exist, not because it wasn't a good idea, but because there was rarely enough to leave anything over. Now, let's turn our attention to the bed, or more accurately, the sleeping space. It's not one bed, but several pallets, some on wooden platforms, others right on the floor. Blankets a few, so everyone sleeps close, limbs overlapping, warmth shared without shame or complaint. They call it bundling in, and it's less about affection and more about survival. You didn't just sleep beside your siblings, you overlapped like layers in a cabbage roll. Occasionally someone might cough, or the wind might rattle the shutters, but the room stays hushed, peaceful. The fire hums, the dog sighs in its sleep, curled near the feet of the eldest boy. The mother murmurs a prayer in Latin, though she doesn't speak Latin, just knows the sounds passed down from her mother, who heard them from a priest once long ago. And now let's pause for a curious little historical morsel. In 1279, a particularly cold winter swept through Europe, leading to food shortages and hardship. People found ingenious ways to stretch their supplies, like drying pea paste into thin sheets to preserve it, then rehydrating it into something vaguely edible. Pea leather. Think of it as the medieval version of fruit roll-ups, just with fewer fruits and more peas. It was during times like that when communal ovens became especially important. A single shared hearth, usually in the centre of the village, where bread could be baked en masse. Villagers would mark their loaves with symbols, carved into the dough with a knife or pressed with a seal, so they could reclaim the right lump later. It was an odd little game of guess whose loaf. But it worked. Back inside our cottage, the night deepens. Outside, frost flowers bloom on the windows, thin, delicate, and slowly expanding. Inside, the world narrows to the warmth of the fire and the soft breathing of the household. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything of you. Let your mind wander through the scene. Imagine the scratch of wool against your skin, the crunch of straw shifting under you. The feel of the thick wooden bowl in your hands, still warm from porridge. The scent of the fire, smoke, ash, and faint sweetness from the bread. Let the rhythm of this world lull you. And as the last candle gutters out and our little family sinks into their bundled warmth, let's drift onward. No need to rush. Just follow the glow into the next chapter. Now, dear listener, settle deeper into your pillow. Let your limbs grow a little heavier. The kind of heaviness that only arrives when your mind trusts it can finally rest. Tonight, we venture farther east, where the frost lingers long into spring and where peasant life was marked by quiet endurance wrapped in thick wool and an unshakable sense of rhythm with the land. We find ourselves in a small village somewhere in the Polish countryside, perhaps around the year 1356. The ground is crusted with a thin layer of ice that glints beneath a full moon. Everything is still. So still, in fact, that you might hear the muffled crunch of fox paws over the snow. And there, in the corner of a wind-sheltered meadow, is a hut. One built with sod and timber, its roof thatched thick with dried reeds, sealed tight with dung and mud, like a natural patchwork quilt. Inside, the warmth is modest. There's no roaring fire. Wood is too precious for that. Instead, a small pile of embers glows dully beneath a cooking pot suspended by iron hooks. The pot bubbles softly, like it's whispering secrets to itself. Tonight's fare is a barley and lentil stew, slow-cooked since morning, thick enough to coat the wooden spoon in sleepy spirals. There's a man inside wrapping his feet in linen strips before slipping them into leather boots softened by years of use. His wife sits beside him, stitching a tear in a woolen shawl with a curved bone needle. The children, 3 of them, heads nearly identical in shape and curl, are sprawled on a bench lined with old pelts, watching the steam rise from their bowls. A cat sits near the hearth, smug and sleepy, tail twitching like it's conducting a silent lullaby. Occasionally it stares into the fire with wide, all-knowing eyes, as if recalling lives it lived in grand castles, though it's far more likely it just spotted a beetle. One of the children holds a piece of stale black bread, dipping it slowly into the stew until it's soft enough to chew. It's tough, yes, but the warmth seeps into her hands, into her belly, into the parts of her that felt hollow all day. That's the thing about medieval food. It wasn't meant for taste. It was meant for staying power. You didn't eat to delight. You ate to not faint while carrying firewood. Outside, the wind sighs against the door, and inside they talk in low tones, gossip about a neighbour's broken cartwheel, a cow that may or may not be pregnant, a tax that might be collected next week. Or next month. Or not at all, depending on the mood of the local bailiff. And now, friend, here's your bite of historical trivia for this chapter. The peasants of 14th century Eastern Europe often relied on a fermented drink made from rye or oats, kvass. Slightly fizzy, barely alcoholic, and sour in a not unpleasant way. It was their everyday drink, safer than most water and gentle enough for even the children. Think of it as medieval soda, but brewed in a wooden bucket and blessed with a wild tang. And if they were lucky, on a festival day perhaps, they might sweeten it with a trickle of honey. Imagine that first sip. The fizz tickling your tongue, the hint of warmth from fermentation spreading gently down your throat. A reminder that even the simplest things could feel like a celebration. The family's dog stirs and yawns, its tongue flopping sideways like it's too sleepy to commit to the gesture. The children are full now, faces shiny from broth and joy. One hums a lullaby, tuneless perhaps, but comforting. Their mother nudges them toward their sleeping corner where straw and hides are laid thick. She tucks in each one, murmuring soft blessings over their heads. There's a stillness that settles now, the kind that feels earned. The embers blink lazily in the hearth. The cat curls tighter, and the man finally removes his boots, stretching his toes toward the warmth like a weary pilgrim greeting home. Above them, on wooden beams, hang dried mushrooms and strings of garlic, casting shadow puppets across the ceiling. The whole world feels small in this moment, but not in a lonely way. Small like a seashell, enclosed, cradled, complete. So let yourself breathe a little slower. Let the rhythm of that hut, that family settle around you. Let the clink of wooden bowls and the gentle sigh of a mother lull you into stillness. Nothing waits for you now. Everything important is already here. And as their fire dims and the wind hums them into their segmented slumber, we tiptoe onward. Another cottage waits, just a snowy hill away. Tonight I'd like you to imagine the taste of winter. Not just the sharp frost on your lips or the smoke curling up your nose, but the slow, hearty flavour of a thick stew bubbling in a pot beside a stone wall blackened from years of fire. We've travelled west now, to a modest settlement in the Welsh borderlands, sometime in the winter of 1403. The valleys here are steep and shadowed, with sheep grazing low on hills dusted in frost. It's the sort of place where fog hangs low until noon, and even then only reluctantly rolls away. A narrow path curls like ribbon between mossy hedgerows, leading to a squat stone cottage, its doorway only slightly taller than a grown man's shoulders. You'd have to duck to enter, but once inside, the warmth is waiting. It clings to your skin like a blanket, soft and close. Not hot, not blazing, just enough to feel like you're inside a cup of tea. The family here has just finished supper. Barley mash thickened with root vegetables and a splash of leftover buttermilk. The buttermilk, by the way, is nearly sour, but it lends the mash a curious tang, something like a fermented hug. Not unpleasant, just rustic. The grandfather, whose beard is mostly grey and smells faintly of peat smoke, tells a story about the time he saw a bear. Everyone nods patiently. They've heard the tale many times before, but they let him speak. In a world without books or clocks or screens, stories were currency, and repetition didn't matter. It was the telling that counted. Beside him, the youngest boy plays with a bone spoon, pretending it's a tiny plough. He drags it through spilled mash on the table, making furrows like a farmer might. His older sister rolls her eyes, but she doesn't stop him. After all, she once used a lump of dough as a puppet. Fair's fair. Tonight's warmth doesn't come just from the fire. It comes from the stones. That's right. Earlier in the day, they'd heated smooth river rocks in the hearth, then slipped them into woven pouches to nestle at their feet during sleep. Stone warmers. Imagine the weight of one by your toes. A soft heat radiating slowly, like the last glow of sunset on your skin. And now, a delightful bit of history. By the early 15th century, the idea of spiced pottage had begun to catch on, especially among households who had access to trade routes. Peasants didn't have nutmeg or cinnamon, those were castle-level spices, but they did occasionally have mustard seeds, or wild juniper, or even dried elderberries to toss into a pot. Just enough to make a bite feel new. One monk even recorded a hedgeberry stew that was described as unexpectedly tolerable. That's as close as it gets to a Michelin star in peasant terms. In our little cottage, the air smells of smoke and damp wool. The eldest daughter hums while she plats her hair for bed, thick, uneven braids meant to keep the straw from scratching her scalp. Her mother pours the last of the cider, sharp, cloudy and fizzy in the nose, into a shared cup, which passes from hand to hand like a relic. The baby of the house is already half asleep, tucked beneath 2 cloaks and a sheepskin. He snores quietly, with the soft puff of someone who's known nothing but warmth and full bellies his whole life. Short as it's been. A dog snoozes beneath the bench. A cat sleeps curled atop the dog because medieval animals didn't care for hierarchy. They just cared for heat. Somewhere in the corner, a chicken murmurs, a leftover from the yard brought in to keep her from freezing in the night. Let your imagination linger on that glow. on the soft creak of old wood, on the smell of cider and cabbage and smoke all swirling together into something strangely pleasant. You don't need to do anything here. Just listen. Just rest. As the family stretches and yawns, pulling back layers of linen and wool, the wind brushes against the door one last time like a visitor who forgot to say goodbye. But it doesn't come in. Not tonight. The door is barred, the shutters drawn, and inside all is quiet. They won't wake until the fire's down to ash and the rooster announces morning. For now, though, they drift, and so can you. Let's step away gently, leave the cat and the chicken to their dreams, and find our next hearth. Imagine, if you will, the soft crunch of frost underfoot, the kind that sticks to the edge of your boots and sparkles like sugar in the moonlight. We're somewhere in the lowlands of northern Italy now, around the year 1387. The Alps loom in the distance like great sleeping giants, their peaks hidden beneath thick clouds. But we're not venturing into those frozen heights tonight. No, we're staying closer to the valley, where the air is still cold enough to chap your lips but gentle enough not to steal your breath. A little hamlet rests beside a bend in the river. You can hear the steady whisper of water slipping beneath a crust of ice. It's evening, and the sun has long since dipped behind the hills. All that remains of its light is a soft lavender sky and the glimmer of smoke curling up from chimneys. We approach a stone cottage set low to the ground, its walls fat with old mortar and moss. The door creaks as we step inside, not from neglect, but from sheer use. Inside, the glow of the hearth greets us like an old friend. The walls are hung with rough cloths to keep out draughts, and bundles of lavender dangle from the beams, scenting the air with a sharp, herbal sweetness. Tonight the family dines on something special, polenta. Not the creamy yellow kind you might see today, but a darker, coarser version, made from whatever grain was available. It's spread onto a board and cut with string, no knives needed. Over it a drizzle of oil pressed from last year's olives, and just a touch of crushed garlic if the harvest was kind. The father leans back on a stool that wobbles slightly, his hands still dusted with flour. He smiles at his wife as she stirs the next day's porridge, already simmering. Food never really stops cooking in this house, it just cycles, like the moon. And now, here's a gentle nibble of historical context. In the late 14th century, northern Italy began to see the rise of cast iron cookware, which allowed for more consistent heat over open fires. This made dishes like stewed beans and polenta more manageable for everyday folk. No longer did you need to balance a pot with sticks and prayers. Now, meals could bubble slowly while hands were free to spin wool or mend tunics. In our cottage, the eldest son is shaping small cheese curds, fresh from their single goat. He sprinkles salt over them like he's dusting snow. His sister, younger but bossier, adjusts the cloths wrapped around the windows, muttering about the draught. Their grandmother snoozes in a corner, her face creased with lines so gentle they look painted on. They speak softly in a local dialect, a blend of Latin and mountain rhythm, the kind of speech that sings more than speaks. And when they laugh, it's not loud, but warm, like wool socks fresh off the line. They'll sleep soon, under blankets stuffed with raw wool and stitched tight with rough linen. The beds are raised just slightly off the ground to keep away the cold that seeps up from the earth. The baby, barely old enough to crawl, is already asleep in a cradle padded with straw and a worn cloak. He dreams, perhaps, of milk and warm hands. The cat prowls along the beam above, occasionally eyeing the mouse hole beneath the cupboard. But even the mice tonight seem too sleepy for mischief. And just outside, the cold hums softly. It's not the biting kind, not yet. It's the kind that kisses the windows and makes you glad for every ember still glowing. You might hear the soft clink of a spoon tapping the side of a pot, or the swoosh of a cloak being hung on a peg, or perhaps just the rustle of straw as someone rolls over, seeking a warmer patch. These sounds aren't loud. They're the background music of a life well worn but deeply felt. As the candles burn lower, their flames flickering like tiny dancers, the house grows still. One last glance is shared between parents, one last check on the door, one last prayer, mumbled and half-remembered. And then they sleep. So let yourself sleep too. drift with them, beneath the beams and beside the fire, where dreams are simple and slow, and as their cottage fades into darkness, we'll slip quietly down the hill, where another glow is waiting just beyond the bend. Let me take you now to the heart of a forest, not one you'd recognize from a modern park or a postcard, but a true ancient woodland. Towering beeches, gnarled oaks, and underbrush thick enough to hide a dozen rabbits and a very confused goose. This forest breathes in the silence, its paths worn by generations of barefoot peasants, monks with aching backs, and wild boars that couldn't care less about either. It's the winter of 1311, somewhere in the deep reaches of what is now Western Germany. The Holy Roman Empire is a distant idea, too abstract to matter much here. This village, tucked at the edge of the woods, lives in the rhythm of firewood, lentils, and wool. The people are part of the trees almost, moving with the seasons, aging with the bark. We come upon a home that isn't quite a cottage, more like a hut sunken slightly into the earth, with a low roof blanketed in moss and sod. The door is rough-hewn, the latch a bit sticky, but inside, oh, the world softens immediately. The walls are packed with mud and straw, and they insulate surprisingly well. The fire is modest, but its warmth clings to the skin, and its scent, sweet from alderwood and a hint of dried apple peel, is almost good enough to eat. Almost. A family of 4 lives here. The parents are young, by medieval standards at least, probably 30. The mother is stirring a pot of gruel made from cracked einkorn grain, one of the earliest cultivated wheats. It's thick, beige, and gently lumpy. To modern eyes, it might look like someone sneezed into porridge. But to them, it's dinner, breakfast, and lunch if there's enough left. Tonight they've added a few dried mushrooms for flavour. Not the kind you find in grocery store tubs, but wild mushrooms foraged carefully, and hopefully not the kind that leads to visions. They've soaked them all day, so now they float in the pot like little brown boats adrift in a grainy sea. And now, a warm little fact for you. In medieval Germany, peasants often seasoned their food with what they called poor man's spice. Wild herbs like marjoram, sorrel, and lovage. Garlic was beloved, especially roasted until soft enough to smear on a crust of bread. Some even grew mustard greens in window boxes. Spicy was rare, but tangy. That they knew. Tonight bread is hard, more like a brick than a loaf. It's cut with a small axe and softened in broth. The father shows his daughter how to hold the crust so the liquid soaks in but doesn't drip. It's a technique, a skill, like dipping toast into soup without losing half of it. Their son, barely 5, clutches a small clay cup of warm milk. The milk has a skin on it, of course, and he makes a face. But he drinks anyway, because warmth in winter isn't something you waste. They sit around the hearth, not on chairs, but on low stools, furs, and woven mats. The fire crackles in a polite sort of way. Occasionally a log hisses like it's offended, then settles into its role. Outside, the woods groan in the cold. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls. No one is alarmed. Wolves howl. That's just what they do. The door is barred. The goats are in the lean-to. The fire is fed. All is well. And inside, it's time for bed. Their beds are inventive, built into nooks of the wall almost like shelves, and stuffed with straw, old linens, and woven woolen blankets dyed with walnut husks. The smell is strong, wood smoke, earth, sweat, and wool, but familiar. Homey. They tuck in, one by one, parents at the centre, children at the edges, wriggling their cold feet toward the circle of warmth like plants reaching for sun. They wear their day clothes to bed. Why waste good heat on changing? The mother pulls her daughter close, tucking her hair behind her ear. The girl yawns so wide you could fit a full moon between her teeth. And finally, the fire dims. The mushrooms go quiet in the pot. The last ember blinks like a drowsy eye, then drifts to sleep. As the family breathes in unison, we slip back out into the snow-dusted woods. The wind rustles the trees with a soft shh, as though the forest itself is telling you to hush. And we listen. Now, let your mind follow the path away from the hut, into the forest shadows, where another warm story flickers on the horizon. Tonight the chill has teeth, not sharp, mind you, but more like a sleepy dog's playful nibble, persistent, nipping just enough to make you pull your cloak tighter. We find ourselves along the southern coast of England, not far from the salt-licked breeze of the sea, where winter arrives with a dampness that clings to your bones. It's the year 1348. The fields are quiet, too quiet perhaps, as this year brought the early whispers of plague. But for now, we're keeping the focus tight. Just one cottage, just one night, just warmth and sleep. The home is simple. Wooden beams, packed wattle and daub walls, a thatched roof with patches darkened by years of storms. It leans a little to one side, as if the wind had gently nudged it and it decided not to resist. Inside, it's snug. Low ceiling, one room, the smell of brine and boiled onions faint but ever present. The family here has made a modest supper, oat cakes grilled on a flat stone, rubbed with the last of their lard. Crispy around the edges, soft in the middle. If you imagine hard enough, it might remind you of a medieval pancake, the kind that's never seen syrup but still warms the belly. Beside it, a small pot of stewed cabbage and onion sweetened with a dried apple or two. Not exactly dessert, but for a winter night it's enough to make them hum softly with pleasure. The father speaks in a low, musical tone as he tells stories of St. Cuthbert and the glowing foxes said to guide sailors home. His voice crackles like kindling. The youngest boy, barely able to sit still, clutches a stick and pokes at the fire, pretending it's a sword. His sister watches him, a mixture of annoyance and admiration dancing on her face. Now here's a little history for the night. In the 14th century, the coastal peasants of southern England often preserved fish by drying or salting it. Haddock, herring and mackerel were staples. Salted fish would be hung from rafters, sometimes beside strings of drying seaweed. On lucky nights, a bit of smoked fish would make its way into the stew, a flavour bomb in a pot of otherwise humble broth. But tonight it's mostly root vegetables and imagination. There's a sheepdog curled by the fire, his fur matted and his dreams lively, his paws twitch as though chasing some woolly fugitive through fields of straw. The warmth from the hearth rolls across the room in slow waves. It doesn't reach the corners, those remain chilled, a reminder that the cold is always waiting just outside the fire's reach. But near the hearth, it's almost enough to believe in spring. The children ready for bed. They wrap themselves in woolen cloaks, stuffing straw under their heads and draping a shared fur across their bodies. The fur smells faintly of lanolin and field, a familiar comfort. The mother dips a cloth in warm water and wipes soot from her son's nose. He grumbles but doesn't resist. She kisses his forehead with a soft thump like a blessing. The daughter tucks her doll, a crude thing made of rags and sticks, beneath the edge of the fur, whispering something to it that no one else hears. Then comes the lighting of the last candle. It's small, stubby, barely more than a lump of tallow. But it glows. Oh, how it glows. Flickering like a heartbeat in the dark, and with care they snuff it out. Darkness swells, soft breathing begins. The occasional crackle of cooling wood fills the room, like a lullaby sung by the walls themselves. Imagine it now, that layered quiet, the deep breath of a family sinking into sleep, the fire curling in on itself, the scent of smoke, cabbage, wool and safety. It's not perfect, but it's safe, it's full, it's home. As their dreams drift toward foggy fields and sun-warmed hay, we'll slip gently out through the thatched eaves, past the salted fish and the dozing dog, and into the dark coastal mist. Just up the hill, a flicker awaits in the window of another home. Let's take a turn inland now, far from the ocean winds and damp hills. The sky is dark as velvet, the stars sharp and stubborn in the winter air. You can hear the hoot of an owl somewhere in the distance, low, rhythmic, almost like it's counting the seconds to sleep. We're in the heart of France this time, around the year 1415. The 100 Years' War rumbles on in faraway places, but here, in this quiet hamlet nestled in the Loire Valley, life presses forward slowly, carefully, as if not to disturb the frost resting on rooftops like a blessing too delicate to move. The village is small, a scattering of homes with puffing chimneys and doors that creak like they're waking up even as they're being shut for the night. We step into one now, low-ceilinged and warm in the way a worn-in sweater is warm. Not too bright, not too flashy, but just right. Inside, the smell of roasted chestnuts lingers. Earlier in the day, the children had gathered them near the tree line, stuffing them into woven sacks and cracking the shells over rocks. Tonight, they've been roasted in a shallow pan over the fire. A treat, no doubt. Rich, nutty, and just sweet enough to make one pause and savour. The youngest child keeps sneaking a second bite while pretending it's still her first. The mother smiles knowingly. Her hands, reddened from scrubbing linens earlier, now rest quietly in her lap. Her apron smells of lye soap and smoke. Scents she's so used to she no longer notices. The stew tonight is lentils, thickened with bits of carrot and a scrap of dried meat from a pig slaughtered back in November. It's thin by modern standards, but nourishing, meant to fill bellies and warm hands. They serve it with hunks of brown bread, slightly burned on one side, but softened with broth until it's the consistency of soggy cake. Not glamorous, but familiar. Here's your historical morsel for this evening. By the early 1400s, chestnuts were an essential food source in many parts of France, particularly in the poorer regions. They were sometimes dried and ground into flour, used to make flatbreads or thicken stews. Rich in calories and abundant in season, they were known by some as the bread of the poor. And frankly, on a cold night, a bowl of hot chestnut porridge probably felt like a feast. Back in the cottage, the father kneels by the fire, turning the last few coals with a stick worn smooth. His face glows red from the flame, and the shadows flicker across his brow like passing thoughts. He hums a tune under his breath, a lullaby learned from his own father, sung in the old tongue where even the consonants sound soft. The family shares a cup of warmed wine, diluted and spiced with a pinch of rosemary and a few crushed berries. It's more tradition than indulgence. One sip passed from hand to hand, warming lips and bellies alike. They settle in slowly, like snowflakes landing on still water. The children curl up under a shared woolen blanket, its edges frayed, its centre patched with cloth from old tunics. The oldest boy keeps a small knife beneath his straw pillow, not for danger, but for pride. It was his grandfather's once. It hasn't seen a blade sharp in years, but that's not the point. The mother tucks in the little ones, pulling the blanket up to their chins. She places her hand on each forehead in turn, saying nothing, but thinking everything. The kind of wordless love that echoes even in silence. The wind murmurs outside. It rattles the door gently, as if testing its strength, then moves on. The fire sighs. The dog at the foot of the bed stretches and emits a snore so delicate it could be mistaken for a creaking beam, and the dark folds around them. Not heavy, not oppressive, but full, like being wrapped in a story older than memory. Imagine now the glow of the fire on the mother's face, the steam rising from the soup pot, curling like ribbon, the feeling of coarse wool against bare feet, the distant chirp of something brave enough to sing in the cold. You don't need to be anywhere else. Not right now. This is enough. And as the last spark in the fire fades to ash, and the warmth of the chestnuts lingers in the air like a dream half remembered, we step out once more into the still night. The stars are clearer now, and just beyond the trees another home glows faintly. Shall we wander there next? Let's take a gentle turn north again, this time toward the low hills of Scotland. It's a crisp winter night in the Highlands, perhaps the year 1293. The stars shimmer fiercely here, like bits of frozen light scattered across an endless sky. The wind moves slowly, thoughtfully, as if it respects the quiet of the sleeping earth. We find ourselves outside a crofter's cottage, built of stone pulled straight from the surrounding land. The roof is low and thatched, its frame stout, huddled against the wind like a sheep in the fold. The doorway is so narrow you'd have to angle your shoulders just to slip through, and once inside, the scent of smoke and damp wool wraps around you like a familiar old shawl. The fire is low but steady, burning peat cut from the bog weeks ago. Peat burns slowly, with a rich earthy smell, something between soil and spice. Its smoke curls thick through the air, leaving a shadowy perfume that clings to tunics and hair. A single iron pot rests over the flame, bubbling faintly. Tonight's supper is something special. Not extravagant, nothing ever is, but different enough to spark a quiet excitement. The family is making crowdy, a kind of soft cheese mixed with a bit of cream and served with toasted oats. It's warm, crumbly and tangy, delightfully simple, like the dairy equivalent of a hug. They don't have fruit to go with it this time, but one of the children has saved a sliver of honeycomb from the last harvest, and tonight he proudly brings it forward. They spoon the cheese onto coarse oat cakes, letting the heat soften the crumb just a little. The honey drips slowly, one golden thread at a time, melting against the warm cheese like sun on snow. No one says a word, but smiles pass around the table like blessings. Now, a curious crumb of history for you. By the 13th century, Scottish crofters often made use of milk from hardy Highland cows and goats to create small quantities of fresh cheese. Crowdy was among the simplest to prepare, needing little more than fresh milk, a warm place, and patience. It was common enough that even poorer households could occasionally enjoy it, especially during feast days or quiet celebrations. And this night feels a little like a celebration. The mother pours a bit of heather tea into carved wooden cups. Bitter, yes, but cleansing. She's saved a small twist of dried herbs to drop in, something that smells faintly of mint and pine. The warmth of it fills their bellies, even if it leaves their tongues a little surprised. One of the children nods off against the wall, his head slipping sideways until it rests in the soft crook of his sister's shoulder. She shifts slightly, but doesn't wake him. Just breathe deeper, slower. The dog, a scrappy thing with one ear that won't stand up, sniffs the air near the fire and then curls into a tight ball. His tail twitches once, a satisfied sigh. The father is cleaning his boots by candlelight, scraping bits of frozen mud off the soles with a smooth stone. His hands move slowly, rhythmically, more from habit than urgency. When he finishes, he sets them near the fire with a quiet grunt. Dry boots in the morning, that's the goal. They settle into their sleeping spots. This cottage has no beds, just straw pallets laid low, layered with skins and woven blankets. They lie shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in cloaks worn during the day and shared among them at night. There's something reassuring in the way they sleep. Touching, overlapping, like puzzle pieces returning to place. The wind outside picks up, brushing against the stones like a sigh. It finds no cracks. The walls are thick. The roof is heavy. The fire is fed. They're safe here. The candle burns low, its flame dancing like it's telling a bedtime story of its own. One by one, their eyes close. Breath slows. The cottage grows quiet, except for the fire. Always the fire, whispering its soft lullaby in crackles and pops. Imagine now the taste of that warm crowdy and oat cake, the soft fizz of heather tea on the tongue, the warmth of peat smoke in your lungs, the weight of wool across your legs, scratchy but firm, the sound of your brother's slow breathing beside you. Nothing moves fast here. Not time, not thought, not sleep. So let the warmth pull you down too, like straw beneath a tired body. You've eaten well, you've listened to stories. The cold can't touch you here. And as we leave that round, stone home behind, stepping gently over a sleeping dog and out into the moor, another hearthlight twinkles in the far distance, waiting, flickering, like a lullaby in the hills. Now, let's drift further east, where the wind smells of pine resin and the snow crunches like sugar beneath your boots. We find ourselves on the edges of what is now Western Russia, in the year 1372. The winters here are long and unhurried, as if the season itself has nowhere else to be. Everything moves more slowly when the land is buried under snow. This village is a quiet cluster of log homes, their eaves heavy with icicles that glitter in the moonlight like hanging glass. We step into one of them, a long, low izba made of thick pine logs, each chinked with moss to keep the cold out. The door is stiff, protesting as it opens, but the warm blast of air inside greets us like a hug. The walls are golden from the firelight, and the scent of smoke mingles with something savoury. The peasant family here is finishing supper, cabbage soup thickened with buckwheat, a dollop of sour cream stirred in for richness. The broth is a little salty, little sweet, with a whiff of dill that cuts through the steam. Bread has been baked earlier in the clay oven, and it's still warm enough to pull apart with a soft hiss. A girl of about 10 ladles soup into her wooden bowl, careful not to spill a drop. She blows gently on the surface, cheeks puffed, while her little brother pokes a spoon into his mouth too early and lets out a tiny yelp. The mother chuckles, reaching over to wipe his chin. Her fingers are red from the cold, but gentle as linen. There's a pot of kasha on the stove for tomorrow, simmering overnight like an old friend who refuses to leave the party. It bubbles quietly, adding a heartbeat to the room. The grandmother mutters a prayer of thanks in Old Church Slavonic, her words slow and worn like river stones. Now for your historical spoonful. In rural 14th century Russia, kasha, a grain porridge made from buckwheat, millet or barley, was the foundation of most meals. It was versatile, easy to grow, and filling enough to carry workers through the day. Left to cool, it could even be sliced and pan-fried in the morning like a medieval breakfast bar. Less like a granola bar, more like a carb brick, but it's stuck to your ribs. The family settles into their nightly rhythm. The father sharpens a small knife over a leather strop. His boots rest near the hearth, steaming gently from the snow. The dog, long-legged and lean, lies stretched out on a bed of old rugs, snoring with gusto. Occasionally one of the chickens, yes, they sometimes lived indoors too, clucks from the corner where it's perched beside a dry basket. They sleep on a raised wooden platform called a palati, tucked above the stove. Heat rises, after all, and the palati is where everyone wants to be on nights like this. Blankets are rare, but heavy coats and fur-lined cloaks serve the same purpose. The children lie close together, their heads nearly touching. They share a single pillow stuffed with dried grasses and wrapped in faded linen. The fire in the stove is not visible, but it radiates through the clay walls, slow and steady. The warmth feels almost round. It presses gently against their backs, chasing away the sharp edge of winter. The room darkens, lit now only by the glow of coals and the glimmer of snowlight through a waxed paper window. The father blows out the rushlight, and the shadows stretch upward like lazy cats. A lull settles over everything, the kind that feels earned. Outside, the wind combs through the forest, stirring branches and sweeping snow off pine limbs. But in here, it's silent, safe for breathing, and the whispery clink of cooling pots. Now, imagine the weight of the fur cloak over your shoulders, the feel of rough wool against your cheek, the grainy warmth of kasha still sitting in your belly, the smell of wood smoke and pine pitch curling gently into your nose. You're wrapped in sleep before it even arrives. There's no rush, no need to rise, the land is sleeping and so are you. And as this quiet Isba fades behind us, we slip again into the hush between cottages. Another flickering light glows, waiting to welcome us in. We drift now toward the low fields of the Netherlands, where winter arrives not with the shriek of icy storms, but with the quiet hush of persistent grey. It's the year 1369. The canals are beginning to crust over with frost, and the air smells faintly of water and wood smoke, like a chimney leaning over a frozen pond. Our cottage tonight sits atop a raised mound of earth called a terp, built long ago to protect it from the floods. The ground is hard beneath our feet, the mud frozen stiff. As we step inside, a narrow wooden door swings open with a groan, revealing a room thick with warmth and the scent of something yeasty and soft. Bread. A fresh loaf sits on the table, round and golden brown, still steaming faintly from the hearth. It was made with rye flour and stretched with bits of old mash from brewing, an early kind of recycling that left the crumb dense, nutty and slightly sour. It's been torn into with eager hands, no slicing needed. In this home, bread is broken, not cut, shared. Beside the bread, a small crock of butter. Not the pale, whipped kind, you know, but a darker, firmer version, salted by hand, pressed into a wooden mould. It spreads reluctantly across the warm bread, melting in slowly like the snowflakes clinging to your cloak. This family keeps a pig in the yard and chickens under the floorboards, literally. The chickens roost on a board slatted just above the earth, where the heat from the stove keeps them drowsy and warm. Every so often there's a sleepy cluck from beneath the planks as if to say, "We're here, all's well." Here's your historical bite. Dutch peasants in the 14th century often made use of bog butter, a kind preserved in earthenware and sometimes buried for months at a time in cool, dark ground. It aged, hardened, and gained a flavour not unlike cheese. Strange to modern tongues, but precious in its time. Tonight's supper was simple. Boiled parsnips and turnips, mashed into a thick paste with that very butter, and served with a spoonful of drippings from the bacon pan. Nothing fancy, but the kind of meal that makes a person sigh with contentment after a long day of weaving, hauling peat, or tending to fussy goats. The father, tall and lean with wind-worn cheeks, sips from a clay mug of warm ale. It's flat, slightly sour and brewed with dried herbs from the garden, something between tea and beer, designed more for warmth than celebration. The children curl near the fire. One pulls a scrap of wool across her lap, knitting with uneven tension, while her brother leans against the dog and hums a tune without words. The dog, shaggy and patient, releases a sigh so long it almost sounds human. Above them, herbs hang from the beams, dried thyme, marjoram, even a few faded rosehips. The mother reaches up to crush a sprig between her fingers, letting the scent drift down through the warm air like an invitation to sleep. Their beds are tucked against the back wall, recessed boxes built into the frame of the house. You step up into them like climbing into a cradle. The walls are close, the ceiling's low, and the warmth. Oh, the warmth gathers there like soup in a deep bowl. The children climb in first, laughing as they tuck straw under their legs and huddle under shared cloaks and stitch quilts. Then the parents follow, carefully, gently. There's not much room, but they don't need much. In these sleeping boxes, everyone breathes the same air, and dreams leak from one pillow to another like soft songs. The fire dies slowly, casting flickering shadows across the clay walls. The room grows darker, but not cold, never cold. The heat of bodies, the shape of home, the sigh of wool, and the breath of sleep. These things hold the cold at bay. And outside, the frost thickens, the canal freezes a little more, the chickens shuffle beneath the floor, and the pig grunts in its pen, dreaming perhaps of summer mud. Imagine the press of the bread in your palm, the rough weave of your tunic, the slight scratch of straw under your knees. Feel the way the fire lingers in your bones long after the last flame flickers out. You're fed, you're full, you are home. Let's slip out now as the cottage sinks into silence. Another terp rises in the distance. Another window glows. Tonight we make our way into the hills of northern Spain, somewhere between the cold peaks of Leon and the mist-laced valleys of Asturias. It is the year 1302, and though the world outside is brittle with winter, the cottage we approach glows golden with quiet firelight. The air is scented with wood smoke and rosemary, and the low stone walls hum with heat that's been building all day. The roof is thatched with straw and rushes, heavy with a dusting of snow that catches the moonlight like a glimmering fleece. We duck inside through a door made from two mismatched planks held together with leather strips and stubbornness. It creaks with a voice of its own, then hushes as we enter. Inside, the warmth presses close, heavy, comforting, and wrapped in the smell of simmering lentils and garlic. This family has eaten well tonight, not richly, but completely. The stew was built slowly throughout the day, lentils, onions, leeks, and a splash of vinegar made from last year's apples. On a lucky day, a scrap of sausage is added, its smoky flavour drifting through the pot like a whisper of feast days past. Beside the hearth, slices of bread have been toasted over coals, rubbed with garlic and brushed with oil. Small luxuries, but savoured fully. The edges are crisp, the centres soft, and when the children bite in, their faces light up as if it were a royal dessert. And here's your little bite of history. By the early 14th century, Spanish peasants had begun using clay and stone bread ovens shared by whole villages. These hornos were fired communally, with loaves marked by family symbols, usually scratched with a stick or pressed with a thumbprint. If your loaf came out burnt, well, you'd only have yourself or the village baker to grumble at. In this cottage, the fire is laid low in a stone pit, not a raised hearth. The family sits on woven mats, their wool cloaks draped over their shoulders, the heat rising slowly from beneath. The walls are hung with jugs, dried herbs, and woven baskets, and in one corner a low platform holds jars of preserved olives and beans, their only assurance against hunger in the leanest weeks. The children are quiet now. One holds a carved wooden flute, though he doesn't play it. He just turns it in his fingers, admiring the smooth grain. His sister fingers the hem of her mother's shawl, eyes fluttering towards sleep. The mother dabs a cloth in warm water and rubs it gently behind the children's ears, a ritual more soothing than necessary. Her hands are strong but gentle and smell faintly of rosemary and ash. The father adjusts the logs, nudging them closer to the glowing center. Sparks drift upward like lazy fireflies. He wraps his thick wool scarf around a wooden peg, ready for tomorrow's frost. Then he lowers himself to the mat, stretching out with the groan of someone who worked harder than the day allowed. Their bedding is simple, coarse blankets layered with woven straw mats. They lie close, not for lack of space, but for comfort. The children curl together like sleeping foxes, noses tucked against each other's necks. Their parents settle in beside them, cloaks and limbs overlapping. The wind outside is quiet. There's no storm tonight, just the soft hush of falling snow and the distant cry of a nightbird circling the hills. The coals glow orange, then red, then soft grey. And now, picture the rough toast in your hand, how the garlic clings to your fingertips, sharp and warm. Feel the wool against your cheek, the stiff edges softened with years of wear. Listen to the fire pop, like someone snapping their fingers in slow motion, and let the weight of the evening press gently on your chest. Not heavy, just present. You've eaten, you've listened, you've curled up in warmth, you've done enough. And as the family sleeps, breathing slow, steady and content, we step away, brushing snow from our cloak as we move down the path. Another valley lies beyond. Another story waits, fire crackling softly in the distance. This evening we find ourselves in the damp valleys of Ireland. The hills here roll like the backs of sleeping giants, their slopes blanketed in low fog and frost-bitten heather. It is the winter of 1327. The sun has vanished behind a curtain of clouds, and the wind whispers through the stone fences, soft as breath against your ear. Down a winding path between moss-covered stones and frozen puddles stands a small roundhouse. Its walls are made of wattle and daub, its roof thick with thatch and peat. Smoke trails upward from the centre, escaping through a hole in the roof like a secret being carried into the sky. Inside, the warmth is instant and deep. The smoke lingers near the ceiling, but down below, near the fire, the air is thick with heat and the scent of earthy root stew. A pot hangs from a metal hook, swinging gently as it bubbles. Its contents are simple: turnips, barley, maybe a sliver of old bacon rind for flavour, but rich enough to make the tongue linger. A woman stirs the pot slowly, leaning forward so her shawl doesn't catch in the flames. Her hair is tied back with a strip of worn leather, and her sleeves are rolled high. Across from her, a boy kneels near the fire, roasting bits of leftover dough on a flat stone. They puff and blacken at the edges, becoming something like a medieval biscuit, crispy, smoky, and just chewy enough to hold a smear of salted lard. And here's a quiet crumb of history. In medieval Ireland, bread was often cooked as small flatbreads or cakes directly on hearthstones. Ovens were rare. These breads, made from oats or barley, were filling and quick, an answer to the long days and cold nights of rural life. The father sits in the shadowed corner repairing a broken hoe with a strip of iron and a careful hand. His fingers are calloused, his back bent, but his work is slow, methodical, almost meditative. Every so often, he pauses to sip from a wooden cup filled with hot milk flavoured with a bit of sea salt and nettle. It tastes like the sea and the pasture had a quiet conversation and decided to be kind. One of the children hums, barely audible, her eyes half closed as she watches the fire twist and flutter. The flames seem to respond, dancing in lazy spirals. The dog, shaggy and warm, lies with its head on her lap, tail thumping gently in a dream. The roundhouse has no windows, just small slits near the top to let out smoke and call in a sliver of moonlight. The walls are hung with tools, wooden ladles, iron shears, a bundle of dried thistle meant to scrub pots and ward off ill luck. Everything has a use, nothing is wasted. The family gathers to eat, dipping their bread into the pot, hands moving slowly. Conversation is spare, but not absent. There is peace in silence, in the way a father nods to his son or a mother smiles at her daughter's first joke of the evening. You don't need words to feel warmth. When the meal ends, the fire is stoked once more with peat. It catches slowly, hissing like it's annoyed to be disturbed, but soon it glows again, radiating out across the packed earth floor. The sleeping mats are rolled out, layers of sheepskin and worn wool cloaks. The children curl up first, each clutching a bit of something soft, a scrap of cloth, a carved trinket, a bit of ribbon saved from a feast day. The parents lie close behind, arms loosely draped. There are no bed frames here, just warmth shared freely. The flames die low. The only sound now is the soft exhale of sleep and the wind brushing gently at the door. It does not enter. It is not invited. Now breathe in that earthy smoke. Feel the heat of the fire on your toes, the scratch of wool against your cheek. Let the weight of the stew and the silence settle into your limbs. Let your breath match theirs. Let the hush claim you. You are fed. You are still. You are wrapped in wool, in firelight, in stories older than stone. And just beyond the next hill, another chimney smokes. Another fire waits. Shall we go there next? Tonight we walk along the gentle ridges of what is now southern Bavaria. The snow falls in quiet flurries, thin and dry like flour sifted from the sky. The year is 1396. The mountains in the distance are silent and still, like ancient gods asleep beneath the ice. But we are not climbing tonight. No, we're descending into a small valley where the lanterns glow faint through the mist and smoke, and every step closer feels like tucking under a heavy quilt. At the edge of a farmstead, little more than 2 oxen, a field and a hut, stands a timber-framed cottage with moss crawling up the corners and bundles of firewood stacked high against the walls. The shutters are drawn tight. The door creaks as we push it open, and we're met with a wave of warmth and scent. Wood smoke, stew, wet wool, and the tang of fermented cabbage. Home. Inside, the hearth glows wide and orange, casting shadows across a low ceiling blackened with soot. A pot of sauerkraut and barley has been stewing since morning, softened now into a thick and tangy mash. A sausage has been strung above the fire, not for eating tonight, but to dry and flavour the air like the world's most rustic air freshener. A boy sits cross-legged near the fire, carving a little horse from wood. His sister braids her hair into thick ropes, tying them with bits of cloth torn from a worn tunic. Their mother ladles soup into bowls, pausing now and then to wave away smoke with a smile. Her cheeks are pink from the fire's heat, and she smells like lard and rosemary. The father, just returned from tending the goats, pulls off his boots with a tired grunt. His toes wiggle freely in the air, steam rising from the thick socks like ghosts set free. He doesn't complain, just settles near the hearth, lets the warmth crawl up his legs like a cat. Tonight they eat slowly, each spoonful of barley and kraut thick with flavour, a little sour, a little savoury, and full of warmth. They chew quietly, and when they finish, the bowls are scraped clean with crusts of rye bread baked days ago, hard as stone at the edges, but softened by the broth. Now, a pinch of historical spice for your night. Sauerkraut or fermented cabbage was a common food in the late Middle Ages, especially in colder regions like Bavaria. It stored well, packed a surprising punch of nutrients, and gave meals a much-needed zing during the long winter months. Even the poorest families kept barrels of it buried in cool corners, opened a scoop at a time. The dog, thick-furred and shaggy, rests near the fire with its chin tucked under its paws. Occasionally it lets out a snore that sounds like a sleepy kettle. One of the children laughs quietly, then hushes herself. The laugh hangs in the air like a puff of smoke, then vanishes into silence. Above the hearth, bunches of herbs dry slowly. Lavender, mugwort, wormwood. Not for cooking, but for teas, tinctures, and maybe a bit of superstition. A pouch of garlic hangs by the door, believed to keep away spirits and perhaps, more importantly, illness. It smells strong but not unpleasant, like a protective wall you can smell. They sleep on low wooden frames, padded with straw and covered in heavy woolen quilts. The mother pulls the covers over the children first, tucking in each edge as if sealing in the heat with spells. The children wriggle, laugh softly, then settle. Their eyes close one by one, their breathing deepens. The fire is banked with ash, glowing soft and red. Its warmth leaks slowly across the room, into bones, into blankets, into dreams. The parents climb into bed last, back to back for warmth, sighing in unison. The wind stirs outside but doesn't knock. The shutters hold. Now feel the soft pull of those heavy blankets, the sour tang of kraut still on your tongue, the scent of firewood curling into your hair. The straw beneath you shifts with every breath, but gently, like being rocked by the earth itself. You're warm, you're fed, you're safe inside. And as this house fades into quiet breathing and ember glow, another fire calls us onward, somewhere just beyond the next ridge. Let your breath slow, just a little more now. We've wandered a great distance, and still the path ahead glows gently with candlelight and chimney smoke. Tonight we find ourselves in the hill villages of central Italy, what we might now call Umbria, in the winter of 1334. The sun has long disappeared behind craggy slopes, and the sky above is a deep navy brushed with stars. The air smells faintly of cold olive branches and cracked stone. The path winds upward toward a cottage built against the hillside, its roof flat with packed earth and tiles salvaged from wherever salvage could be had. A mule stands just outside, its breath fogging in the moonlight, a burlap sack of firewood tied to its flank. It flicks an ear at us as we pass, then settles once more. The home is small, just one room, barely enough space to stretch your arms. But inside the world opens wide with warmth. A hearth glows at the far wall, flames licking upward with lazy grace. The scent of rosemary, garlic and chickpeas hangs in the air like incense. A stew has been simmering since midday. Ceci e pane. Chickpeas, garlic, olive oil, a pinch of herbs, and torn bread crusts stirred in until thickened. No meat, not tonight. But the olive oil is good, rich and pressed from the family's own harvest, stored in clay jugs near the hearth. A mother ladles the stew into bowls made from turned wood. She moves slowly, carefully, not out of fatigue but reverence. Every drop matters. Every bit is accounted for. She spoons an extra helping into her eldest daughter's bowl, it's her name day tonight after all, and smiles when the girl blushes. Here's a little warmth from the past. In 14th century Umbria, olive oil was precious, yet widely used in peasant homes, pressed in small batches and stored in heavy jugs, sealed with wax or cloth. It flavoured soups, coated bread, and was rubbed on dry skin in the bitter months. A drop of golden oil was more than food, it was light softness, preservation. The father dips a crust of toasted bread into his bowl, breaking it with his fingers and chewing slowly. The fire reflects in his eyes. He's said little all evening, but his presence is solid, grounding, like a beam holding up the roof. The children sit cross-legged on the warm floor, nibbling at crusts and licking garlic from their fingers. The baby, barely old enough to walk, toddles across the room and climbs into her mother's lap, clutching a piece of bread in both fists like treasure. The air is thick with wood smoke and laughter. The walls are hung with bundles of dried herbs, a rosary made from olive pits, and a cracked plate they still use for feast days. A cat paces the rafters above, tail flicking, eyes catching firelight as if storing it away for later. They sleep on pallets stuffed with wool and old fabric, pressed together like spoons in a drawer. The father lies near the door, the mother cradles the baby. The older children form a tangled cluster of limbs and blankets near the hearth. Their feet stretch toward the warmth like sunflowers chasing dawn. The fire is banked with ash. One log pops softly, the sound like a sleepy laugh. And outside, the olive trees sway gently in the breeze, their silver leaves rustling like whispers. Now, let yourself feel that heat, the way it pulses low and steady from the hearth. Let your thoughts slow to the rhythm of a spoon stirring chickpeas, of a cradle rocking, of logs settling in firelight. You don't need to move. You've eaten well. You're wrapped in woven cloth, with the scent of herbs curling toward your hair. You're safe. You're warm. You're home for the night. And just beyond the hill, another village waits. Another door is opening. Shall we continue there next? We walk now into the eastern reaches of what was once the Kingdom of Hungary, modern-day Slovakia, nestled between thick pine forests and frostbitten hills. The year is 1318. The stars above are scattered and silver, reflected in frozen puddles like tiny lanterns underfoot. Our boots crunch over hard-packed snow. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howls, a long, low note that echoes off the trees. But there is no fear in it. Just a reminder that the night has its own life, and we are simply visitors passing through. At the edge of a clearing stands a wooden cabin, low and wide, its walls stacked with logs and sealed with clay. Smoke puffs gently from a crooked chimney. A glow leaks out around the shutters, flickering like a secret. The door swings open, and we are greeted not with words, but with warmth, the kind that stops you just inside the threshold and makes your shoulders drop. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by firelight and a single tallow candle. The air is heavy with the smell of simmering cabbage and millet, with a faint sweetness, apple, maybe, lingering at the edges. A pot hangs over the fire, swaying ever so slightly with the draught. Tonight's meal was kapustnica, a thick, sour cabbage stew built from sauerkraut, onion, and dried mushrooms pulled from the root cellar. A few bits of smoked meat lend richness, but the real depth comes from time. Hours of slow, bubbling, coaxing flavour from the most modest of ingredients. The family sits on benches and stools pulled close to the hearth. The bowls are wide and shallow, carved from beechwood, their edges worn smooth by years of use. The youngest child uses 2 hands to lift his, sipping carefully between spoonfuls, lips pursed in concentration. Now for your moment of quiet history. Sauerkraut was common across Central and Eastern Europe in the Middle Ages. Not only was it a good source of vitamin C, but it stored beautifully through harsh winters when fresh food was long gone. It wasn't just food, it was survival in a jar. The father eats slowly, his beard damp with steam from the pot. His hands are cracked from chopping wood, but his eyes are soft. He has already split tomorrow's logs and covered them from snow. The mother watches the children with a tired smile. She doesn't speak, but hums a wordless tune as she mends a hole in the corner blanket with a strip of dyed linen. A small clay cup is passed around the circle holding homemade kvass, mild, fermented, and a little fizzy. It fizzes on the tongue like snowflakes on warm skin, and the children giggle as they sip. The dog, curled in the corner near the woodpile, flicks its ears but does not stir. Too warm, too comfortable. Above the fire, ropes hold bundles of dried herbs, garlic bulbs, and long strings of onions. Every corner of this home has a job. Even the ceiling beams carry purpose. When the meal ends, the bowls are stacked. One child sweeps the ashes away from the fire with a bundle of twigs tied with thread. Another arranges tomorrow's boots near the hearth, hoping they'll be warm when morning comes. They sleep on low platforms, lined with straw and fur, pressed side by side under patched quilts and old cloaks. They do not speak as they settle in, but the rustle of bodies, the sigh of wool, the shifting creak of timber, all of it sings a quiet lullaby. The fire settles into embers. One of the mushrooms in the stew pot pops, and the steam hisses softly into the room. Somewhere above, an owl hoots. The air cools just a little, but no one stirs. Feel now the thickness of the blankets, the scratch of straw beneath your limbs. Let the warmth settle around you like broth in your bones. Let the scent of smoked meat and cabbage cradle you into stillness. You're safe. The door is barred, the pot is full, the fire is slow but steady. And just beyond the edge of the woods, another window glows with firelight. Another bed waits beneath an unfamiliar roof. Shall we make our way there next? Tonight we walk among the marshlands, flat, silvered by moonlight, where the reeds sway like tall whispers and the frogs have long since tucked themselves in for the season. We're in the fens of eastern England, perhaps in the year 1305. It's late winter, and the freeze has turned the watery world to crystal. Our steps are muffled on the damp earth, softened by frost. The air is thick with stillness, the kind that hangs between heartbeats. As we approach a lone timber-framed house built atop a wooden platform, raised against the tides, we can smell peat smoke and something faintly sweet. Stewed apples, maybe, or barley. Inside, the room is low and narrow, lit only by the hearth and a single rushlight stuck into a beetle-board candlestick. The walls are daubed with chalky clay, marked here and there by smoke trails and small drawings in charcoal. A sun, a fish, a handprint too small to still belong to its maker. The family has just finished supper. Tonight it was a barley pottage, thick and slightly chewy, stirred with chopped leeks, carrots and dried herbs saved from last summer's garden. Over top, a drizzle of something rich, rendered fat from the goose they were given at last year's Michaelmas. It's a rare treat and the flavour lingers warmly in their mouths long after the bowls are empty. A young girl licks her spoon slowly, as if trying to save the taste. Her older brother pokes at a clump of barley that's stuck to the side of the pot, trying to scrape it free without being caught. He succeeds, but the family lets him pretend it was unnoticed. And here's your soft slice of history. In the Middle Ages, barley was the grain of the common folk, hearty, filling, and able to thrive in damp soils like these. It was used in bread, gruel, ale, and even as a base for rustic puddings. Barley wasn't just food, it was the backbone of survival. A clay jug of small ale is passed around, lightly fermented and flavoured with bitter herbs, to make it safer than the brackish marsh water. The mother stirs it gently before each pour to unsettle the settled grains. It has a cloudy look and a grassy bite, but it's warm and soft on the tongue. The dog, a short-legged, broad-snouted thing, lies under the bench, belly rising and falling in rhythm with the fire's breath. The father sets his boots beside the hearth, their soles slick with frozen mud, and stretches his legs with a satisfied grunt. The children, eyes drooping, crawl under the patchwork blanket in the corner, the same one used to cover the windows on especially cold nights. They curl together like cats, arms flung over each other without thought. The straw beneath them is packed tight and lined with rags. A bundle of dried rushes lies near their feet, tomorrow's kindling. The mother hums a lullaby under her breath, a tune without words that passes from her lips into the walls, into the fire, into the air. Above, in the rafters, hang bunches of dried fish and a net strung with bones and shells, not for decoration, for reminders, for food, for luck. The room smells of damp wood, smoke, salt, and barley, and the fire dims, slowly, naturally. The rushlight flickers like it's blinking, heavy with sleep. Let yourself feel the rough linen shirt wrapped around your arms, the scratch of straw beneath your knees, the sweetness of barley still on your tongue. Let the fire warm your feet even as the air cools your cheeks. Let the sounds, gentle, slow, repeating, ease into your bones. The wind outside moves over the marsh like a soft hand smoothing bedsheets. It rattles the door once, gently, as if to say goodnight. And beyond the reeds, just past the bend in the water, another home waits with its fire glowing low. Shall we go there next? We head south now, where the soil grows drier, the air carries the sharpness of stone, and even the stars seem to shine with a warmer hue. It's winter in the hills of Castile. Perhaps the year is 1291. The sky is a velvet black, pierced by the glow of constellations once named by shepherds who knew their names long before they were drawn on parchment. Tonight we arrive at a small stone dwelling tucked into the slope of a rocky hill. It was built by hand, each stone laid with care, chinked with mud, roofed with beams and tiles salvaged from the old Roman ruins down the path. The roof is heavy, the walls thick, and the door barely wide enough to admit a bale of hay. But the moment we step inside, we're embraced by heat. A clay brazier glows in the centre of the room, coals nestled inside like a clutch of sleeping birds. This home has no open hearth, just the gentle, ever-breathing glow of charcoal. The air smells of olive wood, garlic, and ash. A pot sits beside the brazier, its lid tilted just enough to release steam and scent. Dinner tonight was sopa de ajo, garlic soup, made with old bread, crushed garlic, oil, and a pinch of red paprika gifted by a travelling merchant. The bread floats like soft islands, the garlic rich but mellow, and the broth. Oh, the broth is the kind that slips down your throat and stays with you, like warmth wrapped in flavour. The children, already full, sprawl on woven mats along the walls. One toys with a dried fig, stretching it like taffy. Another picks at a loose thread on the hem of his mother's dress, eyelids heavy. Here's your quiet crumb of history. Garlic soup was a staple for peasants across Iberia in the Middle Ages. Its ingredients were humble but powerful. Garlic for strength, bread for fullness, oil for richness. In many homes, it was considered a healing food, something to soothe, to restore, to warm bones chilled by the day. The mother, seated near the brazier, dips her fingers in olive oil and smooths them across her chapped knuckles. Her hands are cracked from winter's work, carrying firewood, grinding grain, scrubbing linen against river stones, but tonight she lets them rest. The father reaches for the wineskin. It contains nothing fancy, just a rough, homemade red, tart and young. He takes a sip, then passes it silently to his wife. She smiles without looking and drinks. The goat, small and nosy, shuffles to the edge of the mat and flops down with a groan. In this house, even animals are part of the warmth. It's not just allowed, it's needed. Every breath counts. Above them, bundles of herbs hang from the beams, sage, rosemary, lavender. Not for magic, just for comfort. The lavender will go into the children's sleeping cloths. The rosemary will steep in oil. The sage will make its way into tomorrow's lentils if all goes to plan. The fire dims into a glow. The children pull worn wool blankets over their shoulders, snuggling into the curve of each other's backs. They sleep like roots, tangled, low and grounded. The mother places a flat stone over the coals to keep the warmth alive through the night. The father drapes a sheepskin over their feet. No need for words. Everything that matters is already known. The walls hum with heat, the blankets breathe. The room falls into a hush so complete that you can hear the tiny creak of the olive wood beam as it settles, just once. Now, feel the way the garlic still warms your belly, the sting of the chill on your nose, the softness of a woven mat under your back, the scent of rosemary and wool and ember. Let your thoughts stretch long and slow like a yawn. This night does not rush you, it waits, it holds you. And as we slip out through the stone door, into the wind-licked hills, another cottage light flickers far in the distance, quiet but glowing, like a welcome. Shall we go there next? Now we drift north once again, toward the craggy coasts of Norway, where winter lingers long and the air carries a salty bite from the sea. It is the year 1344. The fjords glisten in the moonlight, rimmed with frost, and the wind curls through the inlets like a wandering lullaby. Our steps crunch over frozen earth as we approach a turf-roofed cabin tucked into the hillside, its walls built from driftwood and stone, sealed with layers of moss and sod. Smoke curls steadily from a narrow chimney. A sliver of amber light glows between the shutter slats like the sun caught inside a box. Inside, the air is thick with warmth. The hearth here is set low in the floor, lined with stones and piled with glowing coals. The smell is deep. Charcoal, fish stock, and the faint tangy aroma of fermenting rye. A cast-iron pot sits over the fire, bubbling gently with a broth that has simmered since midday. Tonight's meal was fiska soupe, a fish soup made with scraps of salted cod, root vegetables and milk. The broth is creamy, flecked with dill and barley, with chewy chunks of fish that flake apart with the press of a wooden spoon. Bits of flatbread float on top like sleepy boats. One child tries to balance his spoon on his nose before it tumbles into his lap. No one scolds him. They just laugh. Here's your quiet scoop of history. Salted cod, klippfisk, was an essential part of Scandinavian peasant diets in the 14th century. Preserved with salt and cold air, it could be stored for months. It softened again when simmered in stews, providing precious protein during the longest, darkest seasons. A slab of flatbread, thin and crackly, sits beside the pot. It's made from barley and oats, baked days ago and now warmed near the fire until pliable. The family tears it into strips, dipping it into their bowls with practiced ease. The mother, wrapped in layers of wool, knits quietly beside the hearth, her needles clicking with soft regularity. The father sharpens a small knife, eyes half closed more by habit than need. One child braids her sister's hair, singing an old rhyme in a whisper only the fire seems to hear. A sheepdog lies under the bench, paws twitching in a dream. In the rafters, dried fish hang from hooks alongside bundles of seaweed, both gently swaying when the wind slips through the stone walls. Near the back of the cabin, a barrel of fermenting cabbage bubbles faintly. Not an unpleasant smell, just assertive. Their beds are tucked into wooden alcoves with thick fur pelts draped over straw mattresses. The children clamber in first, giggling and wriggling until the fur settles into silence. One clutches a carved wooden animal. Another curls around a hot stone wrapped in cloth, pressed tight against her chest. The father adds a few more embers to the hearth, covers the pot with a thick cloth, and lets his hand rest on the back of his wife's shoulder. They say nothing. The silence is the sentence. And the meaning is warmth. Now, picture the flicker of that low fire, how it paints the beams in amber light. Feel the heavy fur across your legs. Taste the soup still lingering on your tongue, creamy, smoky, and rich with memory. Let your hands curl around an invisible hot stone and your thoughts drift, weightless as breath. Outside, snow begins to fall again, softly, quietly, like wool unraveling from the sky. The cabin settles into stillness, and we slip out once more, into the hush beyond the fjord. Another cottage awaits around the bend, its fire low, its blankets already warm. Shall we find it? We move east again, now toward the grassy plains of what was once the Kingdom of Bohemia, modern-day Czech Republic. It's the year 1325, and the landscape is dusted with snow, as if a baker has taken a soft hand to the earth. The sky is low and grey, the clouds heavy with more to come, but there is no wind, no sound, just stillness, like the world itself is holding its breath. In a clearing surrounded by bare-boned trees, we see a low rectangular cottage. Its steep roof is packed with snow, the thatch below dry and tight, weighted with stones to keep it from lifting in the winter gusts. Smoke drifts upward from a chimney made of brick and clay, and faint light flickers behind the wooden shutters. Inside, the warmth folds around us like an embrace. The walls are plastered and pale, the wood beams above streaked with soot. A single fire glows in the corner hearth, burning cleanly with the dry wood cut from the old oak tree last fall. Hanging above the flames is a pot of thick mushroom and barley soup, the steam curling through the room with a sweet, earthy scent. This evening's meal was hearty. The mushrooms were foraged and dried in summer, now softened into chewy ribbons swimming in broth thickened with barley and root vegetables. A bit of sour cream stirred in at the last moment turns the whole pot into a rich, sleepy comfort. At the table, a grandmother tells a story in slow, melodic tones. Her voice is like wool, soft, warm, and slightly scratchy. The children listen with wide eyes, though they've heard the tale before. Something about a man who turned into a tree to avoid taxes. They giggle when the tree sneezes. Here's your small spoonful of history. In 14th century Bohemia, wild mushrooms were a staple for peasant families. They were foraged in late summer, dried on rooftops and stored in cloth sacks to flavour soups and porridge all winter. Some villages even had elders known for knowing which fungi fed and which fooled. A skill passed not through books, but through bites. The father pours a bit of warm beer into a ceramic mug, clouded and mild. It's not strong, barely fermented, but the heat and the herbs help soothe the chest. The mother breaks a loaf of rye bread into pieces, handing each child a chunk to sop up the last drops of soup. The crust is tough, but the inside is soft and fragrant, made with crushed caraway seeds and yesterday's sourdough starter. The fire crackles. A dog scratches at the door, then curls into a lump near the hearth, his nose tucked under his tail. The flicker of flame paints soft shadows on the whitewashed walls. Every corner seems to sway with a golden light. Soon they prepare for bed. The room is cleared slowly, lovingly, bowls stacked, bread wrapped in cloth, the fire stoked once more. The children wash their hands in warm water ladled from the kettle and dry them on a frayed bit of linen that smells faintly of soap and sunshine. Their beds are tucked into the wall, deep alcoves lined with straw and padded with cloth and sheep pelts. The wooden doors of the sleeping niches slide closed like shutters, holding in heat, blocking out drafts. The children nestle in, limbs tangled, cheeks pink from warmth and barley. The parents settle on the bench by the fire, sharing the last mug of warm beer, hands touching quietly. The grandmother lies on a pallet, her breath slow, steady, content. A lull fills the cottage. Not silence exactly, but a gentle nothingness. The kind of peace that comes only after a full belly and a familiar story. Let yourself feel that now. The weight of the wooden mug in your palm, the taste of mushrooms and bread lingering on your lips, the heat from the hearth washing over your legs, the scent of barley, firewood, and old wool softening the room around you. No frost can enter here. No wind will find you. You're wrapped in warmth, in quiet, in the memory of every meal ever shared by firelight, and as the embers blink in their little bed of ash, we slip out once more, closing the door gently behind us. Another home waits in the valley below, its smoke rising in invitation. Tonight the wind is soft as thread. It drifts through the valleys of what we now call Romania, near the edge of the Carpathian Mountains. The year is 1286. The snow here lies in shallow waves, like a great white blanket tucking in the forest. The moon rides high, cold and bright, brushing silver across the pine boughs. At the edge of a birch grove tucked partway into a slope for warmth, stands a home built from thick logs and sealed tight with clay. Its chimney leans like a tired elbow, and a curl of smoke dances out into the dark. There is no sound but the soft crunch of frost and the hush of your own breath as we draw near. Inside, the cabin is dim and golden. The hearth is set into a large stone base, piled with glowing logs that hiss and crack as the sap inside bursts free. The warmth presses against your cheeks immediately, bringing a flush that feels like kindness. Tonight's meal is still being savoured. A thick porridge made from cornmeal, known as mamaliga, has been spread onto a wooden board and cut into slabs with a string. It's firm, soft at the centre, and dotted with crumbles of sheep's cheese and spoonfuls of rich roasted garlic paste. The children scoop it up with chunks of flatbread, licking their fingers when they think no one's watching. Now for a savoury little truth from history. While maize hadn't yet reached Europe in the 1200s, earlier versions of this dish were made from millet and barley flours, grains boiled into hearty porridges and often cooled until sliceable. Even without corn, the technique and tradition lived on through the centuries, passed down from pot to pot, hand to hand. The mother pours warm milk into clay mugs, flavoured with a cinnamon bark she's hidden in a cloth pouch since the feast of St. Nicholas. The spice is rare, but tonight calls for comfort. The milk froths a little at the lip, steaming in the cold air of the cabin. The father rests his feet near the fire, wrapped in layers of wool and hide. He's spent the day mending tools in the shed, and his hands are blackened with soot and pine tar. But his smile is wide as he watches his daughter trace patterns in the ashes with a twig. A baby sleeps near the hearth, wrapped in a fur-lined cradle, her breath barely audible above the fire's hum. A low lullaby, sung softly by the grandmother in the old tongue, weaves through the room. No one joins in, but everyone listens. The fire seems to breathe in time with the song. Garlic hangs from the rafters in braids. Dried beans are tied in bunches. A jar of pickled cabbage, bright pink, salty and sharp, sits near the back wall. Tomorrow it will be spooned over stew. Tonight it simply rests like the rest of them. They sleep on mats close to the fire. There are no separate rooms here, just space divided by rugs and silence. The fur blankets are thick and smell of smoke and lanolin. The children curl together like pups, arms flung in every direction. The mother tucks an extra shawl around their feet. The father snores gently, one hand resting on his chest, the other still half holding his mug. The fire dims, the coals spread wide, glowing like scattered stars on stone. The room fades into orange, then red, then grey. Now, feel that thick porridge on your tongue. Earthy, soft, a little salty. Feel the mug of milk warming your hands. Feel the heavy wool tucked over your chest, the sound of someone breathing beside you. There is no need to move, not yet, not until the rooster calls. The mountains rest, and so do you. And just beyond the birch grove, another chimney puffs gently in the dark. Another bed, another story waits for us. Tonight we follow the sound of slow bells ringing from a small chapel in the distance. Their chime rolls across the frosted meadows of what was once the Duchy of Lorraine, now the borderlands of France and Germany. It is the year 1382. The hills are round and sleeping beneath snow, and the woods stand tall like old silent monks watching over the land. At the far end of a narrow path lies a thatched farmhouse, its sides weathered by rain, its windows tucked beneath thick wooden eaves. A single candle flickers in the window, its glow golden and low, like a wink to wandering souls. Inside, the air smells of rye flour and roasted onions. The hearth is bright with flame, and the heat reaches far into the corners, even to the shelves where sacks of dried apples and flour hang like old memories. A stew pot rests on the stones, still warm, though supper has passed. Tonight's meal was grütze, a thick grain stew made with groats, softened root vegetables, and the last of the year's onions. It has the texture of porridge and the flavour of long patience. A few shavings of hard cheese were stirred in near the end, melting into threads that stretched like laughter from spoon to mouth. Here's a soft note from the past. In the Rhineland and across the Holy Roman Empire, peasant families relied heavily on grain stews like grütze. Cooked with water, milk, or even ale, they changed by season and region, but always fed bellies and soothed bones after a cold day. The family now sits quietly around the fire. The eldest son mends a torn boot with a curved needle and thick waxed thread. His little sister leans her head against his shoulder, half asleep, clutching a piece of dried pear in one hand. The mother spins flax on a small wheel, her foot working the treadle in a slow, sleepy rhythm. The father has gone still in his chair, not quite asleep, not quite awake, his fingers resting on the handle of his spoon. Their dog, grey and shaggy, lies beneath the table, tail gently thumping each time the children stir. A hen clucks from her basket in the corner, feathers puffed, eyes closed. Even she is part of the warmth. The shutters are closed, but the wind still presses against them, searching for cracks. It finds none. The walls are thick, the clay tight, the thatch packed firm with straw and prayers. The house holds the cold at bay like a shield. Before bed, the mother dips bread into hot milk and hands it to each child, a ritual as old as their family name. The crust softens, the milk steams. It tastes like warmth, like closing your eyes, like all is well. They sleep in box beds, built into the walls with sliding doors. The children crawl in together, feet tangling, whispering softly, even after the shutters are drawn. Their laughter becomes slower, quieter, then gone. The parents settle onto a straw-filled mattress, cloaked in wool, their bodies forming a hill beneath the heavy blankets. The fire crackles, just once. The milk cools in the cups. The room sinks into hush. Now, breathe in the smell of rye and smoke. Feel the warmth of bread in your hands, the scratch of wool on your ankles, the steady heartbeat of quiet all around you. Let the story of the stew and the boot and the spinning flax wrap around you like a second blanket. Outside, frost creeps across the ground, but it will not enter here. And just beyond this field, a flickering lantern shines in the window of the next home. Another warmth, another waiting hearth. Shall we step inside? We walk now through a low valley in what was once the Kingdom of Aragon, in the north of the Iberian Peninsula. The year is 1351. Winter has reached even this temperate land, draping olive trees and vineyards in a thin shimmer of frost. The cold here is quiet, not bitter but creeping, as if it waits politely at the edges of doors, hoping to be let in. But the door ahead is shut firm, smoke curling upward from a clay chimney. The home is square, squat, and built of sun-bleached stone. Its roof is tiled, patched with moss and history, and a small lantern sways on a hook above the threshold. It creaks softly in the breeze. Inside, the air smells of ash, fennel, and something crisp and sweet. Fig bread, perhaps, pulled from the embers not long ago. The hearth is wide and low, filled with glowing coals and a few crackling sticks. A brazier nearby warms the stone floor, and the light it throws flickers up the whitewashed walls like dancers made of shadow. The family here has just eaten. Tonight's meal was a rustic empanada, a flat pie made of wheat dough filled with mashed beans, onion and rosemary, then baked in a pan beside the fire until its edges were golden and chewy. The children helped press the dough earlier, their thumbs leaving dents that puffed into delicious dimples. And here's your quiet bite of the past. Peasant families in Aragon often cooked with legumes, olives and herbs grown along the hillside terraces. Simple ingredients, but when wrapped in bread and baked near the coals, they became something soft and fragrant. Meals that lingered on the tongue and in memory. The youngest daughter licks her fingers, her cheeks streaked with flour. Her older brother carefully slices a quince in half, sharing it out while pretending to ignore how sticky his hands have become. Their mother watches with a half smile as she stitches a new patch onto the tablecloth, a cloth handed down 3 generations, faded from feast days and funerals alike. Their father leans back on a low stool, carving a wooden whistle with a curved blade. His hands move slowly, not because of age or fatigue, but because there's no need to rush. The fire keeps time, the walls hold the warmth. Outside, the wind waits. A jar of olives rests on a shelf, alongside pickled garlic and sun-dried tomatoes. Every bite here has been earned, grown, gathered, saved. The family's only hen roosts by the fire, fluffed up and sleepy, unbothered by the comings and goings of children. They sleep not in separate beds, but beneath a large woven quilt that stretches from wall to wall. The floor is lined with mats stuffed with straw and wool. The children lie curled together, their feet warming each other, arms flung carelessly like tossed scarves. The parents join them, adding to the pile of breath and weight and dreams. The fig bread rests on the table, half wrapped in linen. A ceramic cup of warm water sits beside it, steam rising in lazy spirals. The fire shifts, a stick falls. The room glows, then dims. Now, let yourself imagine the warm bread in your hands, soft, chewy, and sticky with fruit. Let the scent of rosemary fill your chest. Let the hush of the fire and the soft hum of breath lull you into that in-between place where nothing needs to be done. You are fed, you are full, you are pressed between wool and warmth and the quiet promise of morning. Outside, the valley lies under a quilt of stars, and farther down the path another light shines from behind thick shutters. Just one more home before the end. Shall we visit? The path winds now to the edge of the known world, or so it once seemed. We find ourselves near a windswept coastline in the far west of medieval Wales. The sea lies beyond a bluff, whispering in long, tired sighs. The year is 1308. The sky is the colour of pewter, the waves unseen in the dark, but their steady rhythm is felt in the earth beneath your feet. There, near the cliffs, stands a lone cottage built low to the ground and braced against storms. Its walls are of thick stone, its thatched roof pinned tight with heavy stones and woven rope. A single candle burns in the window, its flicker faint but sure, like a heartbeat you can see. Inside it is warm, not blazing, not grand, but constant. A peat fire smoulders in the hearth, its embers glowing soft orange under a blackened kettle. The walls are curved slightly inward, as though the house itself is curling up against the cold. Woolen cloaks hang near the door. Sea salt clings to everything like dust. The meal has passed, but the scent remains. A thick caul, soup made with leeks, barley and bits of mutton, has left its memory in the air. The broth was deep and savoury, served with wedges of oat bread and a smear of butter so yellow it seemed to hold a bit of summer. Tonight's final taste of history. Leeks have been cultivated in Wales for centuries, and in the Middle Ages they were more than food, they were pride. Nutritious, reliable, flavourful. Monks wrote of their healing properties. Warriors wore them in their caps, and peasants, they put them in everything. The family sits close together on a bench built into the wall. The children rest against their mother, her arm draped lazily over their shoulders. The father hums a soft tune, a sea shanty turned cradle song, its words too old to translate. The dog sleeps at their feet, his belly rising and falling, paws twitching with the echo of some long chase across a dream field. A small window looks out onto the sea. There's no moon tonight, but the stars are clear. So many stars it feels as though the world might lift off the ground. The eldest son points them out through the glass. naming constellations with whispered certainty. Their beds are tucked into niches carved into the stone wall, warmed with fleeces and lined with sheepskin. The children crawl into theirs without protest, their feet already tangled before their heads meet the pillow. The youngest clutches a stone, a flat, smooth one he found by the tide and believes keeps him from nightmares. The kettle hisses once, then quiet. The mother tucks the wool tighter around her daughter's shoulders. The father steps outside for a moment to check the door latch. The sea wind brushes past him, tasting his face, then moves on. When he returns, he stirs the peat fire, then lets it be. The glow remains, low, steady, alive. Now, breathe in the scent of salt and smoke. Let the weight of the sea rest on your chest. Not heavy, just present. Hear the lull of the waves, the creak of timber, the final hum of a house settling into sleep. You have wandered far. You have sat at many hearths. You have tasted their bread, heard their songs, felt their warmth. And now you are still. You are wrapped in wool, in quiet, in time. The shutters are drawn, the fire is fed, the world holds its breath with you. And as the stars wheel silently above, this last cottage, like all the others, sinks into peaceful, shared dreaming. And so, we come to the end of our journey. We've travelled far, dear friend, through snow-covered forests, across foggy valleys, beside coastlines and under thatched roofs, into the warm, flickering light of lives lived slowly, simply, and fully. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If you drifted off somewhere along the way, let me know below. I'd love to hear where your dreams began. Sleep well, sleep deep, and until next time, good night.